the field and got people to recognize that this was in fact a regular feature of UFO encounters. How common is it is hard to say. Originally, researchers thought it was quite rare. I think now it's probably a lot more common than people realize. Edith Fiore, she found that fully half of her clients had reported this, which is what Ray Hernandez found. MUFON measured it around 10%. I think it's somewhere between those figures, 25, 30%, perhaps more. A lot of people don't report it. But here's another book that started to talk about ETs in a more friendly way, because there's an enormous amount of fear surrounding this subject. The media is very fear-based. Humanity is largely fear-based. And I can tell you, having been in this field for a very long time, I don't think the ETs are here to hurt us. And I think that this is what a lot of researchers are finding out. I always refer people to Barbara Lamb, because her research matches what I found, and John Mack, and Edith Fiore, and Ray Hernandez. So I don't think the abduction narrative as it's being put forth is really accurate. It can be scary, but it's not overall a negative experience. This is Adrienne DeVere, the researcher who wrote another book, Healing Entities and Aliens, who put forth a very important concept, or I guess a result of UFO encounters, which is that many people who have these encounters come away with the ability to heal. So he did a lot of research and practical work in that field. So after writing that book, it did quite well, but every time I spoke, I got new people coming up out of the audience every time. Someone would say, oh, I was healed of an infected tattoo. ETs healed me of blindness, of deafness. They took a wart off my body. I mean, the entire range of medical conditions. Every time I went on the radio or a podcast, I did go on television at one point, got more cases that way. So they really started to add up. And after that first book went out of print, I still had a lot of cases. So I put out this new book, which has 300 cases. And I can tell you that's just the tip of the iceberg. 1 in 100 people report their encounters in any official capacity. And I'm being generous there. And when it comes to healings, I'd say it's even less. So you could times this by 100 or even 1,000. There are a lot of people being healed. And I think a lot of people who are healed might not even know it, because there's spontaneous remissions. This is a medically verified thing. A lot of doctors are absolutely baffled when people's condition suddenly reverses. ETs are not seeking attention and will heal people often without them even knowing it. I think that absolutely does happen. But this is Gordon Creighton, editor of the Flying Saucer Review. And I got to give him kudos, because he's the first researcher to even talk about healings. And he did this way back in the late 1960s when he wrote an article on healing cases. He presented about 10 cases. I cornered Bud Hopkins once because he never wrote about UFO healings, and I suspected he had them. And at a conference in Coronado Island, the Triad Conference, I asked him flat out, have you any healing cases? And he says, yes. And I'm quite encouraged by them because they show a benevolent side to ETs. He says he's very much encouraged about the outcome of all this. He agrees that ETs are not here to hurt or scare people. That is not their agenda. David Jacobs does take a more dim view towards this contact phenomena, but he has many cases as well. People healed of pneumonia, of cancer, of diphtheria, you name it. And what I found was pretty much, as I said, every major researcher has these cases. John Mack uncovered several cases. Edith Fiore, as I said, fully half of her clients reported cases. Dear Barbara Lamb has many cases as well, healings of back injuries, of heart injuries, of all kinds of conditions. everyone, all of them do, really. Brad Steiger has many cases. Yvonne Smith had a case of a gentleman who was apparently cured of AIDS. I do have another case in France of a gentleman who was cured of AIDS as well, which, is an incurable condition here on Earth. There is no such thing as incurable. It's just that we don't understand it. And the ETs, I think, understand more about the human body than we do. But here's Wendell Stevens, very prominent in this field. He had several cases. Richard and Lee K. Boyland wrote a book called Close Encounters with Extraterrestrials, and they had several cases as well. So many, many researchers, Tim Beckley, Joe Burks, RD6 Killer Clark, Constance Clear, Ann Druffel, I mean, you name it, Timothy Good, Bill Hamilton, Ray Hernandez, Cynthia Hind, Chris Rutkowski, of course, Jim and Coral Lorenzen, all of these, Leonard Stringfield, Jacques Vallée, of course, all have healing cases. And this is important because this shows that this is a consistent feature. It's happening all over the world. I have cases stretching back over 100 years. And one point that I think we need to understand is that ETs have been taking people on board and physically examining them for a very long time. And with their advanced intelligence, they know quite a bit more about the human body than we do. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that they do cure what we consider chronic and incurable conditions. And these cures occur in many different ways. They are often done using light of some form. This can be a handheld instrument when someone's taken on board, but there are many cases of people struck by a beam of light from a UFO, and that will heal their condition. Sometimes just being in the presence of an object will heal people. There are many cases like that. They do use traditional methods as well. Medicine does turn up in a number of cases. People are given drinks or pills or salves or lotions, these sort of things. Of course, many contactees do report having surgical procedures as well. These are some of the scars that Bud Hopkins has recorded on people's bodies. I kind of look at these as vaccinations in a way. I do think that the alien implant phenomena is related to this, because contactees have asked the ETs flat out, what is the purpose for implants? And in every single case that I have what I would call firsthand information on this, rather than speculation, the ETs say it is for healing. They will say things like, it is to measure the level of pollution in your body. It is to boost your immune system. It is to monitor your vitals system. So I think the purpose for implants really is not tracking or mind control, as many have speculated, but it's actually all about healing. Medical evidence is very important. It's something that can make or break a case. In fact, in the MUFON handbook for investigators, there is a section. It's called Medical Injuries as a Result of UFO Encounters. That needs to change because while injuries do happen, I think healings are far more common, and injuries are often very minor, perhaps minor bruises or puncture wounds as a result of an instrument, or burns in some cases where people have gotten too close to a landed UFO. That does happen, but the majority of healing cases seem to be very much intentional. These are marks that appeared on a gentleman I work with by the name of Mike Evans. And this is what we call medical evidence. He had an apparent foreign body, was diagnosed in his body. These are the alien implant phenomena. But yeah, medical evidence does turn up in a number of cases. This is a case from Kentucky in which 3 women, Elaine Thomas, Mona Stafford, and Louise Smith, had an onboard encounter and afterwards suffered severe eye irritation, burns, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, and weight loss. So apparently they may have had some sort of radiation exposure. That does happen in a few cases. Here's a picture of Denise Bishop, who was struck by a beam of light from a UFO on her hand, and she was diagnosed with a laser burn. So this is medical evidence. This is a very famous case in Falcon Lake, Canada, involving a gentleman by the name of Stefan Michalek, who got close to a landed UFO, and it took off, and he had all kinds of symptoms that pretty much mimicked radiation sickness. So that does happen, but of course I want to focus on healing cases, which are more positive, intentional, and I think far more numerous. And there are four main types of categories, I would say, or places where people are healed. The first, which is about 20 to 25%, take place in people's homes. ETs will essentially do a house visit and heal you while you're in your bed. Another portion takes place on board craft. This is probably the largest portion, about 50%. And this is particularly true if someone is suffering from, say, something like cancer or a very severe disease. A surprising number of cases take place while people are just driving around outside or walking outside, and a UFO will swoop down over their car, over them, send down a beam of light and heal them. And what really surprised me, was absolutely shocking to me, was about 10% of the cases take place inside hospitals. This illustration here is of a real life incident in Canada where a nurse by the name of Doreen Kendall saw this UFO hovering outside the children's wing of Cowichan Hospital in British Columbia. This is Doreen Kendall. So, and here's the hospital where she saw the UFO. So yeah, a lot of cases of people healed in hospitals. They will come right into your room, which we know they can do. So I'm gonna go down some of the more credible cases, the ones I think that have something to say about the UFO phenomena, how they heal, who they heal, and the conditions they heal. And here's a very famous case, which is quite well verified, involving two police officers by the name of Robert Good and Bill McCoy. And they were driving through Damon, Texas on September 3rd, 1965, when they saw this craft pictured here, hovering over a field. And as they watched, they were driving by in their police cruiser, it sent down this beam of light and struck them. And one of them had his arm hanging out of the car. He said he could feel this beam of light. It was warm and tingly. And they became quite frightened and drove off and parked in a diner. And that's when he realized that the cut on his hand, his finger, was gone. He had been bit earlier by his son's baby pet alligator, and it left a wound that was inflamed, painful, bleeding. And they took off the bandage, and you could not even tell he had been bit. So I have a lot of cases of healings of flesh wounds. One of the most common categories, there was a really interesting case in 1991 in Puerto Rico, where a gentleman by the name of Jose Fernandez had been bitten by a shark, and his leg was very badly damaged and infected. And he had an encounter, and his wound healed up. So they will heal people of flesh wounds. That happens quite often. Here's a case from Jacques Vallée, which occurred on November 2nd, 1968, to a medical doctor. That's important. Remember that, as to who is being healed and why. He interviewed this gentleman, a medical doctor, who saw a UFO outside his home, two of them actually. They merged into one, turned on its side, and flashed him with a beam of light. It dazed him, and he went back to his bedroom and fell asleep. And when he woke up the next morning, he noticed two healings. This is not unusual. People will be healed of multiple conditions. He had earlier gashed his ankle quite badly while cutting wood. That axe wound was gone. But even more impressive, he was suffering from chronic partial paralysis as a result of injuries received during the Algerian War several years earlier. His partial paralysis was now gone, and in fact, he was able to take up professional piano playing. He was a professional piano player. So this is a really well verified case from Jacques Vallée. Timothy Green Beckley has many cases. One I'd like to mention, I think is quite interesting because it occurred to a high profile figure, a columnist by the name of Brandon Blackman. This was in 1974 in Prospect Park. Brandon Blackman and a group of other people saw a UFO. It just kind of hovered over them and off it went. And he went back to his home, his apartment, and couldn't get inside. He was locked out, which he couldn't understand because he had his keys with him, but now his keys were gone. And he had the supervisor come in and unlock the door, and they found his keys on his bed. So someone had put them there. And he thinks it may have something to do with this encounter that had just occurred. And that's when he noticed that a cut on his hand had been healed. Another case occurred in 1952. This is a case from the guy, gosh, now I've forgotten his name, who first wrote about UFO healings. He was the editor of the MUFON Journal. At any rate, Hans Klotzbach was a guy who was traveling through Europe trying to escape conflict and jumped off a train rather than go through the border and ended up breaking both his legs. And he was pulled on board a craft, and the ETs basically told him that he's a good man, he's going to do important work, and they will heal him, which they did. And this was the case that got the investigator, Gordon Creighton, now I remembered his name, to investigate healing encounters. So there are a lot of cases like this. Another case I'd like to mention occurred to a gentleman by the name of Jim Law from Gainesville, Florida. And this is a really interesting case because Jim Law had had lifelong encounters and was tired of being afraid of the Greys and got over his fear. And they showed up in his home in Florida. And he said, "Oh, if you're going to take me, why don't you heal me of this hernia? It's really been bothering me." He was about to have surgery. This is medically verified. He's got his doctor reports. And the ETs, the Greys, said, "We know of this condition that you speak, and we will repair it." That's a direct quote. And they did. It's a little handheld instrument instantly. He was quite impressed. He says, "Why are you taking me? Why do you keep taking me?" And they said, "We are interested in your genetic potential to live a long time." That was fascinating to him because his grandfather was 106 years old and still spry, still quite active and healthy. In fact, his mom and his aunts were all very long-lived. He had real good longevity in his family. And I think this points towards the ETs and what they're doing. When they take people on board and are physically examining them, it's because they are healing them. They are protecting their DNA. This is one of their main agendas. It really is. And I think it's very interesting that human longevity has pretty much doubled over the last couple of hundred years. This could be partially due to them. And I will say many of the contactees I've interviewed do experience remarkable good health, rarely get sick, and have grown to a very old age. That's not always true. So, we all have struggles, medical issues, but this is definitely a pattern I've noticed. There is another category which I find quite interesting, is sometimes people injure themselves on board a UFO, or perhaps while they are being taken on board. And that's what happened to Charles Moody, pictured here, who in 1975 was taken on board a craft and struggled the whole way and ended up injuring his back. And the ETs took this round-like instrument, pressed it up against his back, and healed him. Got a lot of cases of back healing. One does come from Barbara Lamb, involving two ladies who had a UFO hovering overhead. They jumped out of their car and were running across the field away from it, trying to escape it. One of them was hit by a beam of light from a UFO, healed her back condition. Another case I'd like to mention occurred to a lady I'll call Natalie. This case is important because it really got me to understand who is being healed and why. About half of the people who have healing cases have a long history of UFO encounters. And that's what I thought was the main factor here. They are healing people who they are in contact with. But there were many cases of one-offs, people who had never had a UFO encounter before. And that's what happened to this lady I'll call Natalie from Norway. She had grays come into her bedroom, flip her around like a rag doll, she says. She says it was quite scary. She was screaming at them, "Who are you? What are you doing? Stop." They never communicated to her, and basically lay her down on her stomach and press this instrument, very much like Charles Moody described. Pressed it up against her back. She felt electricity or energy coming into her back. It was very quick, a couple of minutes at most. These grays filed right out through the wall. She jumped up, went to the window, and there was this eerie blue light, which quickly shut off. And that's when she noticed that her chronic back pain, due to a prior injury, was gone. And as I questioned her about this, I asked her if she had had any childhood encounters, which I fully expected because that is a pattern. She said no, she had no prior encounters whatsoever, which really puzzled me. And so I continued to question her, and I said, "What do you do for a living?" And she says, "Well, I'm a retired artist, but now I work in human rights and animal rights in my country. I'm quite well known." She really insisted upon anonymity because of it. And that rang a bell for me, because I instantly thought of other people I had interviewed who were social workers, who were environmentalists, who worked against racism, who were medical doctors, teachers, actors, inventors, musicians, police officers, people who do good work for humanity in some capacity. And that is absolutely a pattern as to who is being healed and why. That continues to exert itself. Another case involves a gentleman by the name of Richard Rilke, who is a contactee and has had many encounters and has been healed on numerous occasions. He was healed of an ear infection from an accident where his ear became infected and he almost went deaf. He crushed his finger when he was working at a factory, and his ET friends, who were human looking, came in and healed him right in his hospital room. He was in an auto accident and they healed him of the injuries in this accident. I have several cases like that. One lady I interviewed was in an accident in Georgia. She was pulled on board a craft, removed from the scene of the accident, and the ETs told her she had actually died in this accident and she wasn't supposed to. Her brainstem had been severed. And they said they would heal her, and they did, of most of her injuries, but not all of them. And they said, we cannot heal all of them because some of these are karmic. You were meant to be in this accident, but you weren't meant to die or get this severely injured. And they placed her back in the scene of the accident moments later, before the first responders came. So they basically extended time or pulled her out of the time stream. And I have other cases like this, where people were told, we cannot heal all your injuries. Some of these are karmic. So this is an important point that I really wanted to make clear. Jerry Wills is another, what we would call contactee. He has had many encounters with human-looking ETs. He's still on the lecture circuit. I've met him personally. He was healed of a very bad fever as a young boy, and he's ended up becoming very influential in this field. And he is actually a healer himself. And he has a website. He does this regularly. He's written a book about it. And he's got well over 100 remarkable testimonials from people he has actually healed himself. I've had some of these contactees do healings on me. and I could feel the energy coming out of their hands, or actually see pastel lights. Thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the lady just smiled and says, "Oh yeah, some people can see that and some can't." So this is something that a lot of contactees report. Some of the cases are really puzzling. This is Leonard Stringfield, and he interviewed a little kid by the name of Chuck Doyle from Florence, Kentucky, who swooped down over his house. Chuck Doyle was in the backyard. It was a little manta ray-shaped craft. It sent on a beam of light which struck him, and he was temporarily paralyzed. He says he could see all these landscapes, weird equations going through his head, geometric shapes, strange cities, and this beam retracted, and he ran into his house to tell his mom, who saw the craft dart away, and that's when they noticed his head cold was gone. So this is an interesting case to me because, why would ETs fly light years or wherever they're coming from to cure a little boy of his head cold? It's an enigma, but I've got a lot of cases like this where people are cured of very minor conditions. One gentleman I interviewed was cured of a chest cold. ETs came right into his house and gave him this liquid, which he drank. Here's Jim Sparks. He's pretty well known in this field. He reported that being healed of flu, and once he was taken on board, and the ETs, the Greys, handed him these little boxes of black goo. He says it stunk real bad. He said, "What's this?" They said, "This is our gift to you. We had pulled this out of your lungs." And they showed him an image of him getting very sick. He was a heavy smoker. He stopped smoking after that. It's a really interesting case because I have another case exactly like it. The only difference is the shape of the containers. But a gentleman was pulled on board, and the ET says, "We have a gift for you," and handed in this smelly black goo. He quit smoking as well, though later started smoking marijuana. The ETs were not happy about it. They came down and said, "This is not the life we had planned for you. You need to stop smoking marijuana." So they will actually give people medical advice. There's another case in which they told a lady to stop eating fatty foods. She's getting too fat. She was not happy with her encounters, and she particularly did not like being called fat by the Greys. But I think this is an important point, that they do have people's health in mind. Edith Fiore had many, many cases. She interviewed two sisters who were cured several times. They were both cured of yeast infections. And on one occasion, one of the sisters was healed of breast cancer. Here's the ET that healed her, and they used this instrument on her and healed her of tumors in her breast. And she also ended up having surgery at one point as well. The people who have had cancer cures often report that it's a surgical procedure, sometimes lengthy, sometimes even painful, but absolutely effective, in that this cases of incurable cancer suddenly disappear. Quite a few cases like that. Here's a gentleman, a night watchman by the name of Ventura Maceras, who in 1972 was struck by a beam of light from a UFO, and there was lots of evidence to support his case. The tops of the nearby eucalyptus trees had been burned. He suffered what appeared like a mild case of radiation sickness, but he was interviewed over 60 times by doctors, police, government officials, and UFO researchers because he had a very interesting symptom of his encounter, which he started to grow a whole new set of teeth. It's one of a few cases I do have of dental healings. In fact, here's another, which comes from journalist Bob Tietz, who wrote the book West Virginia UFOs. He interviewed a gentleman who had an impacted wisdom tooth, and he asked the ETs to heal his infection, and they did. It's one of several cases of people who have asked for a healing and received it. It's a very small category, maybe 10%, but it absolutely does happen. There are many cases of eye cures, quite a few. Researcher John Carpenter had a case in which a gentleman was suffering from color blindness. The ET showed up, actually removed the eye out of the socket, worked on it for a little bit, and cured him of profound color blindness. After that, the only color he couldn't see was green. Before, he couldn't see any colors. There's another famous case from Ralph and Judy Bloom, who interviewed a Peruvian customs official who went out on his balcony on December 9, 1968, was struck by a beam of light from a UFO and cured him of nearsightedness. And not only nearsightedness, but rheumatism. So that's another case of someone who received multiple cures. But I have about 15 or 20 cases of eye cures. One guy following his encounter had binocular vision for 2 weeks. He could see things really far away and could control it. Another lady I interviewed was cured of glaucoma. She went to her ophthalmologist. He was shocked because the optic nerve, which had been getting thinner and thinner and thinner, was almost back to normal. So a lot of cases of eye cures. Another guy was cured of chronic night blindness. There's quite a few cases of this. Howard Menger is a contactee. He was on Okinawa when he suffered injuries from a shell which exploded. It hit his eye. His eyes became infected and he became totally blind. But he was visited in his hospital by a mysterious nurse who they could not identify. He asked about the nurse and they said there's no such nurse. He was later taken on board and recognized the voice. It was one of his contactees. His case is controversial, I will say. There are some who have tried to debunk it. I don't think successfully. He does have supporting eyewitnesses. He has actually more evidence than a lot of people do in the average case. But yeah, it is absolutely controversial. Here's Anna Jamerson and Beth Collings, who wrote an excellent book called Connections. And they both had dramatic improvements in their sight following their encounters. And it was Anna Jamerson who was told by the ETs, you're getting too fat. You need to stop eating fatty foods. Here is Alan Godfrey, a police officer who had an encounter with a UFO. It was right in front of him on the road. He drew it right here while he was sitting there watching it. He was ridiculed mercilessly by his fellow officers and his superiors, even though there was a number of witnesses who called the police station to say that they saw UFOs, even though there was physical evidence. The road where this object had hovered was completely dry, even though it was pouring rain. And there was other evidence, but they kept on ridiculing him. It got real bad. His superiors asked him to resign. He refused. They took away his police car and gave him a bicycle. And at one point, they even planted drugs in his locker. So he just quit, even though he was an award-winning police investigator. But important here is that due to injuries received from an earlier assault, he had been rendered unable to reproduce. He was infertile. One evening, a UFO apparently showed up. They didn't see it, but the wife heard it hovering over the house, a very loud buzzing noise. She tried to wake Alan up. He could not be roused. And in the morning, they became frisky for the first time in years, intimate. And she became pregnant. And he accused her of sleeping around. She's like, listen, no, I love only you. And so he went to the doctor. And that's when they found out that his fertility had been restored. I do believe Barbara Lamb has a case like that as well. I know other cases. So this is the kinds of healings they can do. It's right across the board. Let's see, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go pretty fast through the last of these cases because I don't want to run much over an hour. But here's Carl Higdon, a hunter and oil field worker who in 1976 was out hunting in Rawlins, Wyoming, and was taken on board. He was actually taken to apparently another planet. It's quite an involved case. I won't get too into it, other than to say that it's very well verified. His truck was found out in a field with no tracks around it. Other people in the area saw a UFO at the time he was being taken. He had no memory of what happened until going under hypnosis by Dr. Leo Sprinkle. But there was evidence that something strange had happened because he had 2 healings. He was healed of tubercular scars on his lungs. His lungs were all scarred up from tuberculosis, and those were gone. And even more amazing was his kidney stones. His condition of kidney stones was completely reversed. I've got quite a few cases of that. In August of 1980, Hector Vasquez, whose best friend was a contactee, was suffering from kidney stones, and they were rushing to the hospital with his friend, the contactee, when a UFO showed up and started circling the car. And Hector Vasquez sat up. It's like, the pain's going away. I'm feeling really good. And by the time they got to the hospital, the UFO had darted off. His pain was gone. They went into the hospital, and there was no sign of his kidney stones. I know another lady who was suffering from, I don't know her, but I know the case. She was suffering from chronic renal failure. After not being able to go to the bathroom for 2 or 3 days, she went to the doctor. He was horrified. He said, "You are having chronic renal failure. You need to go to the emergency room right now, or you will die." She went home to call her family, her friends, and her employer, and said, "Pray for me. I'm going to the hospital. I am very, very sick." And she fell asleep on her bed in the middle of the night, woke up. There were short little brown-skinned beings, not grays, who were rubbing her abdomen. She was going in and out of consciousness. She woke up the next morning and went to the bathroom, went to the doctor. He says, "I don't know what to tell you. I must have misdiagnosed you. What happened? I don't understand it." She did not want to tell him that it was ETs. So she just said, "I think it was angels." But she had been praying for a healing, and it happened. And she was right, it was ETs, because it was a month or 2 later, they took her on board. It was not ambiguous at all. There was a rounded room, a table, the ETs, the whole deal. And they used this instrument, which I've heard described many times. It sort of makes a holograph of the inside of your body in full living color. And they said, "Look, here's your kidneys. Don't they look good? You're healthy." And she's like, "Yeah, they look great." And then they slid this instrument over her liver and said, "Look at your liver. Do you see all these dark spots?" And she could. And they said, "This is bad. Your liver is damaged. You're drinking too much Diet Coke. You need to stop drinking Diet Coke." So this is another case where they're dispensing dietary advice. And just on a little tangent, it's not only physical healings, they do psychological healings as well. I've got 3 cases of people who were suffering from suicidal depression. And one guy was ready to take his own life, had the gun up to his head when grays appeared, and absolutely voided the suicide, he said. So yeah, several cases of that as well. Here's a case from Constance Clear involving a gentleman who was very unhappy having his encounters. He found them quite fearful, even though he was given a gift, a metallic bar. He had long conversations with the gray who he was in contact with. Her name was Melda. And at one point, he was taken on board and they said, "What are these things in your kidney? Do they help you function?" And he said, "No, those are kidney stones and they're causing me all kinds of problems." And they said, "Oh, okay, we will remove them." And they did a procedure on him. And he did this drawing here. Well, Constance Clear took this drawing to a kidney specialist and he recognized it instantly. He said, "That's lithography. That's how we get rid of kidney stones." So they use some of the same techniques on some occasions, but usually are far more advanced. Bill Hamilton has a case in which a Southern California lady was healed of a tumor in her breast. The day before surgery, she had an encounter, went to surgery, and they couldn't find it. This is what I call the last minute syndrome. They will wait till a person is on their way to the hospital or even in the hospital room. I don't know why they do this, but this is a pattern I have noticed. It happened with the lady I mentioned earlier, Wendy. She was the first healing case I had uncovered. She had a cyst in her fallopian tubes. It was causing all kinds of problems for her, pain. And the night before surgery, this cyst was verified with MRIs. She had a visitation in her bedroom. At the time, she lived in Acton in Southern California. And went to have surgery, and the doctors were quite upset because the pre-op imaging showed that the tumor was gone, and they accused her of going to another hospital and having surgery, which she denied. They said, we know you've had surgery because not only is your tumor gone, but there's fluid here that's present in your fallopian tube, which could only be present if you've had surgery. But she totally denied it, like most contactees do. They will not tell the doctors. So here's the type of ETs she saw when she was a little girl. She's had lifelong encounters with them. And she says some of the experiences she's had have been the most loving, gentle, emotional experiences she's ever had with any other being. So it's simply not true that grays are cold and emotionless. There are little short AI grays, which do not display emotions in the way that we do. But the mid-sized grays and the taller ones are absolutely very much like us in terms of emotional capacity, though they don't have the problems we have with greed and hate and divisiveness. So I have a lot more cases. Let's see. Can I go on another 5 minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Because I just got a few more cases I'd really like to share with you. Some of the best are at the last. This is Chris Bledsoe, and he was healed of, oh my gosh, what was the condition? He was suffering from it for years and years. Now it's escaping me, but Crohn's disease. That's right. He's from North Carolina, had a visitation. His son was there, his friends, they all saw these UFOs. Some of them were rendered unable to move, but he was pulled on board and cured of Crohn's disease, which he had suffered from for years. I met him face to face at a conference, a very nice guy, absolutely sincere. You cannot fake a healing like this. He was on loads and loads of medication. So this is a really remarkable and well-verified healing. As I said, some people are healed in the hospital. This is an illustration by Kisara of Fred White from Durham, England, who had to be hospitalized for a hole in his heart. He saw a UFO 4 years earlier, but in 1967 was hospitalized and was about to have surgery. And when this doctor walked in, he was quite unusual looking, but basically human, other than his very hypnotic large eyes and very pale skin. He was dressed strangely in a uniform and had this weird instrument on his wrist, which wasn't a watch because it had no face to it and it was glowing. And this gentleman said to Fred White that we are very interested in your works in electronics and we are going to heal you. Your work is really important. And they healed him, and it completely baffled the doctors because they were about to wheel him into surgery. And he says, no, don't, I'm feeling much better. Look, I can breathe. I have no pain. And so they ordered another set of pre-op images and the hole in his heart was gone. I know Barbara Lamb has another case involving a gentleman who had a hole in his heart for years and should not have been able to live as long as he did, but was receiving regular treatments from ETs for his heart condition. So yeah, lots of cases where people were healed in the hospital room. This is an illustration by Katarina Wilson, a real estate broker who's written a couple of books about her encounters. She was struck by lightning in the lightning capital of the US, Florida, and apparently had problems with her heart because she was immediately pulled on board and the ETs said, we need to heal you, and put this instrument over her chest. She said it was quite painful, but she woke up in the morning, there was no marks on her body, and she was perfectly fine. I've got several cases of heart healings, 14 in fact. There was one gentleman who in 2013 had an ET appear by his bedside, stuck his hand into his chest, and then pulled it out. And that was the extent of it. But it alarmed him, and he had a feeling he should go to the doctor because he felt like this was a sign, and went to the doctor, and the doctors were absolutely shocked because he had a bicuspid aorta valve, which should be tricuspid. And he was also suffering from congestive heart failure. He needed surgery immediately. They could not believe he was still alive, but due to the fact that he went to the hospital, they were able to save his life. Okay, just a few more cases. This is John Hunter Gray, who suffered, well, I won't use that word, but at the time, it was he experienced a missing time encounter with Greys, which is your standard kind of scary, pulled on board, physically examined, needles coming at him. But he and his son both remembered this without hypnosis in the days and weeks following this encounter. There's a lot of interesting aspects to this encounter. They saw a really weird figure at the gas station immediately before they were taken on board. A short little guy in a fisherman's cap and huge sunglasses who followed them all the way to the abduction site, the contact site, and then disappeared. And that's when he was pulled on board. There's a number of cases like that. They are among us at times. So they pulled him on board and did this whole procedure on him. And afterwards, he started to have a number of physiological improvements. He had basically a health upgrade. He was already healthy, but following this encounter, he was middle-aged. He grew 2 inches. His cuts started healing faster. His hair grew at twice the rate it did. His skin tone improved. Several scars disappeared and wrinkles faded. A chronic injury from a car accident disappeared. His fingernails started growing much faster. He quit smoking. His feet grew several sizes, and he never had colds or flus ever following this incident. His son did experience these symptoms as well, but to a lesser degree. So this is what I think John Mack would call a health upgrade, and there are a lot of cases like it. RD6 Killer Clark had a case involving a bicycle racer who was pulled on board. He had no illnesses to speak of, but after being taken on board, he started winning all his races. He said he was made much stronger and faster. Got a number of cases of people whose intelligence and their ability to take tests dramatically improved. One guy was able to test it with his, he had had a prior IQ test, and his IQ rose like 20 points. Other people were having memory problems and this sort of thing. And I will say that if I looked up the top 10 causes of death according to the World Health Organization and the Center of Disease Control, and ETs have healed people of every single one of these top 10 killers of humanity. So this is how truly advanced they are. This is an illustration by Kisara of John Hunter Gray's healing. He says they injected him basically where a lot of his glands were. Here's another drawing by Kisara of a gentleman who says that ETs took him on board and actually removed the top of his skull and did surgery on his brain. He was suffering from a condition known as angioma. This is a malformation of the blood vessels of the brain, usually, and it's often fatal. And in fact, he was expected to die. He had lost his ability to talk. He was going blind. He was unable to move properly. And that's when he was pulled on board. Doctors were so impressed, they ordered exploratory brain surgery and found that his condition of angioma had completely reversed. Here's an illustration. This is from Edith Fiore's research. And this was the instrument that was used. And here is one of the ETs he saw. I've never seen a drawing like that, but there it is for what it's worth. So there are many other cases in Tbilisi, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Tbilisi, Russia. There was a series of people who were getting cured, and these UFOs were coming down and curing people in such large numbers that whenever a UFO would appear, people would run towards it. There was some dozen or more cures of heart disease, of diabetes. One child was cured of liver disease when he was taken on board. Got many cases of people healed of liver disease. One involves a UFO researcher who went on a UFO stakeout, Hans Lauritsen. He was cured on December 7, 1976, when he stood in front of two UFOs who shined lights on him. And the ETs told him that he's doing important work, he's going to help a lot of people. And he went to the doctor afterwards, and his liver, which was twice normal size, had been pulled down to normal size. Here's a book by Denise and Bert Twiggs. Every member of their family has experienced healings. She was healed of a C-section scars. Bert had a chronic cough. They healed him. The son was cured of a sty in his eye, and the daughter was cured of an asthma attack. Here's Sisto Paz Wells, who's very well known for calling down UFOs. He's a contactee. He did a contactee CE5 group in Sebago cabins in upstate New York. And on that evening, a gentleman says that ETs came into his cabin and cured him of arthritis of his legs. He was a dancer and had to give up dancing. But following this, he was able to dance again. Here's another case, real brief. Joy Davies from Pennsylvania says that she was taken on board with her dog, actually, and they were both cured. She had severe arthritis, and her dog was elderly and also suffering from arthritis, and they were both cured. She was able to take up tennis playing again. Got quite a few cases of people healed of arthritis. One guy, age 4, was suffering from rheumatic fever and expected to die, Gabriel Flores. And his mom was rushing him to the hospital when a UFO showed up. And the whole car, interior of the car, heated up. And Gabriel suddenly stood up in the back seat and was chipper and happy and pain-free. And he was absolutely 100% cured of rheumatic fever. And this is medically verified. It's quite a famous case in Chile, actually. So all over the world. Here's Cynthia Hind, who documented a cure of someone who's cured of liver hepatitis. Here's Michael Carter, a really wonderful man who I interviewed. He does the lecture circuit as well. He's written several books on UFOs. He's a healer himself. He was cured of a blood clot in his leg by human-looking ETs who actually used mind power or hands-on healing. About 10 to 15% of the cases involve no instruments at all. ETs will just lay on hands. His doctor was very much baffled by the cure. So just, let's see, a few more if I may. This is João Valerio, who was cured, or not cured, there was a kid in the town where João Valerio lived. He's a contactee. And the kid suffered a cerebral aneurysm. And João Valerio was the hospital doorman. So the doctors asked him to ask the ETs if they could cure this child who was well loved. And the ETs, pictured here, provided this medicine, pictured here, and told him to rub it onto his body, and this would cure the damaged nerves. And it did. And they saved a sample of this for chemical analysis. It turned out to melt at body temperature. It was much in the form of raw sugar, crystalline, but all the tests came back negative. They could not identify it. All they could say was that it was chemically unique. So yeah, many cases. One guy, Dean Anderson, saw a girl cured of muscular dystrophy. A lot of people have seen other people being cured. Linda, who was Edith Fiore's client, saw people healed of all kinds of conditions, bursitis, intestinal worms, hip problems. David Jacobs had a case involving a lady by the name of Alice Haggerty, who was cured of diphtheria. So yeah, these healings cover the entire range. I mean, I haven't even gotten close to number of cases. People have been cured of spider veins, of strokes, of tuberculosis, of multiple sclerosis, hypoglycemia, hemorrhoids, fibromyalgia, epilepsy, gallstones, and of course, cancer. This is a lady by the name, oh gosh, what is her name? She was a city councilwoman in Florida, Lynn Plaskett, who was suffering from cancer. She had a little ball of light, a solid object though. It appeared to be metallic, sending down beams of light on her and cured her of cancer. I've got 30 plus cases of people cured of cancer. Here's a gentleman I interviewed who actually filmed this orb as it went into his body. At the time, he was suffering from this tumor on his neck. And when he woke up in the morning, it was gone. He went to the doctor. He says, the ETs healed me. He has been very forward with his doctors. The doctors could find no trace of cancer. This is in his medical records, which he sent to me. The doctors did not write ETs cured this man, but they did write miraculous healing. We can't explain this. But he was very forward with his doctor, and he actually filmed this orb as it moved into him. It's a moving film. You can find it online, but this is a still frame of it. Ray Hernandez has a case involving a gentleman by the name of Alberto Fernandez, who's also cured of cancer. So there are many cases. I found about 50 cases of people healed as a result of lightning strike, which I think is related to this because this shows how light can heal. Mary Clamser was struck by lightning and it cured her of multiple sclerosis. People are also rescued. I've got many cases of this. One lady by the name of Sherry had a motorcycle accident. Her bike was all busted up. ETs came and repaired her bike so she could start it up again. But I've got many cases of people who were rescued at sea, who were prevented from having car accidents. That happened to Lillian Richter. A UFO showed up and stalled her car. And as soon as it left, she kept going on the highway and narrowly missed a severe car accident. Got a lot of cases like that. And ETs also give information on how to heal. That's what happened with the Integratron, where George Van Tassel was given instructions on how to build this building, which, if finished, was supposed to be a healing center. Unfortunately, he died shortly before it was completed, but it's one of many cases like this. So Whitley Strieber has received cases of healings. He also receives letters daily, as do I. I get them all the time, emails from people saying, please bring the ETs to heal me. I wish I could. I don't have that ability, but I can say hands down that this is one of their primary agendas. They are coming to people, taking them on board and healing them. I think this is really the purpose of the exam. In my latest book, Symmetry, about Dolly Safran, she's experienced several cures. She's watched people be cured. And she says that this is the main reason. They're taking people on board and protecting their DNA, because our planet is going through a real problem right now with our magnetic fields collapsing. We're on the verge of having a gigantic CME, a coronal mass ejection. And they're upholding people's DNA and standing by to scoop people up if it comes to an existential crisis. And I know how this must sound, but this would be a worldwide rescue. And I've got many other contactees who have received this same message and have dreams of the sky filling with UFOs and landing en masse. And it's their job to tell people not to be afraid, it's okay, and help lead people on board. So this is good news. The ET threat narrative is not true. They are here to heal, to help, to guide, to teach. And we should be very thankful and lucky and work hard against this ET threat narrative that is being put forth by the media and the cabal, if you will. The one percenters call them what you want. But that is my presentation. Sorry, I ran a little bit over, but I want to thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. if you'd like.
Wow. That was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. I was just taking all kinds of notes here. And I do want to ask, did anyone ever report, and if you said it, I missed it, but has anyone ever reported being taken on board a healing occurring while they were in white space?
In white space?
In white space. Not that they saw anything, but that they were taken to a place and it was just all white space.
I can't say specifically that I have cases like that. I will say that people who have near-death experiences do experience that, taking into the light, and do have healings.
Right.
Near-death experience, and for that matter, astral travel, out-of-body experiences. I documented some 20 to 30 cases of people who experienced healings during astral projection.
Wow.
That will include cuts and colds, all the way up to severe diseases. Albert Taylor cured himself of multiple sclerosis. This happened to Bruce Moen, who had sarcoidosis of the liver. So I think that does happen with near-death experiences. People who are taken on board generally describe seeing a hospital-like setting. But yeah, it can be very bright, and lights are often used in healing.
Well, the only reason that I ask is in 1999, I became a walk-in, and I had been diagnosed. I had sarcoidosis. I had erythema nodosum. I'd been diagnosed previously with bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia. I was a very sick person. And then sometime during the night, it felt like someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of the head. It felt like lightning ran through my body, and then I was in white space. Long story short, whatever happened, which was when the walk-in, came in and that soul exchange occurred, there also was an instantaneous healing. And so I'm always asking, I know a lot of near-death experiencers do have the white light experience, but I just wondered if you had ever encountered anyone, if they had gone on to a UFO and had a white light experience.
There are a few cases where people have been taken to see, other dimensions, and Dolly Saffron talked about that. They took her to basically see the light at one point. So there are a few cases like that. And I will add also that past life recall is also similarly healing, because we do carry trauma over from past lives, and there are people who have gone under hypnosis. Barbara Lamb could probably speak to that. It can be physically healing, not only mentally healing, but physically.
Yes, absolutely. Just right there in the regression, when they go through that trauma that inflicted the injury in the past life, and then they understand the whole context for it. When they get out of the regression again, they give me feedback later that they've been tremendously relieved of that physical problem or completely healed. And that's true of trauma, emotional trauma too. Like a person who drowned in a past life and then had a huge phobia. One woman, huge phobia of being in the water. She couldn't even allow herself to take a shower and be a shampoo in the shower, or she never ever went swimming or anywhere near water. And she wondered, why that was such a severe phobia. So we did a regression to a past life when she was a young man, and she drowned. We all sailing a small boat, and that drowning trauma carried over to this lifetime. But once we knew what that trauma was from, it just released.
Wow.
She no longer was afraid of water anymore.
Yeah, phobias are a huge indicator of a past life. So if you have a phobia, that's probably where it comes from.
Absolutely. Wow. So Preston, do you have any final thoughts or comments that you would like to leave us with tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've made it clear that how I think the evidence speaks for itself. Healing is one of the main reasons people are pulled on board. But the ET agenda, I think we've got a pretty good handle on it. And I always point people to the research of Barbara Lamb and John Mack, because those are my favorite researchers who I think have really got a good handle on what's going on. And I think that, yeah, I understand people have negative experiences. It's usually fear related to this physical exam. But if you don't have a strong fear reaction, that's when they give you a tour of the craft. That's when they will take you to the observation deck or put you in the pilot's chair or give you a long conversation. Their agenda also is to wake us up to who we are and what we can do. And that's what I would like to put forth here, is that this is very important for us to start meditating and waking up to our abilities to do telepathy, astral projection, past life recall, physical levitation. I wrote about that in my latest book. That is something we can do. Physically levitate, teleport, remote viewing, healing, precognition. These are natural human abilities, not supernatural. So we all need to meditate, wake up, let go of fear, stop looking to our lying governments for answers on this subject. They will not disclose. They do not have our best interests in mind. It's up to us to come together in love, truth, and compassion, and really wake up to the fact that we are immortal beings with limitless ability.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And do you have a website if people want to go or someplace where they can order your books?
Yeah, I do, Sheila. Thank you. If you just punch my name in on the internet, it should take you there. PrestonDennett.weebly.com. I also have a YouTube channel. I'm all over social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I should probably do TikTok, but I haven't conquered that one yet. But yeah, my books are on Amazon as well. And,
Beautiful.
I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about this. It's so important that people understand the extraterrestrial presence on our planet, that it's absolutely good news.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for bringing that message. I'm so excited to hear you and have you here tonight. And Barbara, it's been an absolute honor to have you as my co-host this month. I sincerely appreciate it. And do you have any final comments that you would like to make?
Well, I am so delighted that Preston is bringing out all of this part of the truth, this part of the whole extraterrestrial phenomenon. And that's basically what I've been trying to do ever since 1991. When I give talks, it's always bring in some of the positive aspects while appreciating that many people also are fearful about this, the abductions happening. But, I always try to bring out the fact that there's so many favorable, wonderful, excellent things that the beings are doing for us. And so I just thank you so much for bringing that out so wonderfully, so prolifically. Yeah, it's great. And I think people really benefit from the stories, as you were telling the stories. It's not a matter of statistics and facts, although it's helpful to know that you had 40 cases of this and 20 of that, gives us a sense that lots and lots of people are having these things happen. But you tell it in such an understandable way, in such a likable way, that so and so who had such and such happen, and it's really very, very inspiring. So thank you. You're adding wonderful information to the world.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. And I would also like to thank all of our audience that's here with us tonight, all of our Zoom participants. And in a few moments, we're going to end this segment and we're going into the Q&A segment. So I have to go ahead and do my little commercial here for the Galactic Alliance. And if you have not signed up to be on our mailing list, please do so by visiting the galacticalliance.org. That's just the galacticalliance.org. You can see it right here on the screen. We'd love to have you to join us. We have Cosmic Conversations every Monday and Thursday night. And of course, now we are on the Conscious Awakening Network, which is also on Roku and Amazon Fire, Apple TV. We have phone apps. We have the website, which is the consciousawakeningnetwork.org. We're out on all of the major podcasting platforms and social media platforms. So please visit us somewhere and join us. We have some absolutely phenomenal speakers. But until we are back together again next time, I want to wish everyone a beautiful and blessed week, and namaste. So thank you so much for being with us, everyone. And Barbara, thank you for being here with me throughout the month. Much love to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Very joyful.
Good night.
Night.
Okay. So we are still live on YouTube. And if you want to go ahead and ask a question, please raise your hand. If you want to join in the conversation, just let us know if you have any questions for Preston. How about you, Mary? Do you have any questions?
Hi, Preston. Nice to see you again today. Beautiful to see you, Sheila, and Barbara just took off for a second. I love you, Preston, and I've loved interviewing you the last few weeks too. You've always been such a warm heart and a bright spot on this planet, bringing out the stories and the love and the beautiful effects of what our ET friends do with us and for us. I love how you work with children too. So if you could just talk a little bit about some of your kids' experiences with a couple of your books. I love the school ones. Barbara and I put one of them in our ET book, but you have a special place in my heart for how you not only see the good in everyone and the ETs, but also for our children who you research and have done tons of books on those experiences. So could you just say a little bit to that, please?
Yeah. Thanks, Mary. I love you too. I wrote a book called Aliens and UFOs, which was aimed towards children, as well as one on Bigfoot, actually. I think it's really important because if you interview people who have the contact experience, you will see that it often occurs very early in childhood. And a lot of them don't have much recourse. Their parents might not believe them. That does happen in a lot of these cases. On a few rare occasions, I got to interview children while they, shortly after they had their experience. That's quite rare. I did put out a book called Schoolyard UFO Encounters, which really touched my heart and knocked my socks off because I did not know this was a thing. I think we've all probably heard of the Rua, Zimbabwe case at Ariel Elementary School, which in very brief, in 1994, involved a UFO which landed next to the schoolyard, and ETs came out and communicated with some of the kids. And that really struck a chord with me, rang a bell, I should say, because I instantly thought of several other cases, like the Westall High School case in Melbourne, Australia, or the Crestview Elementary School case, which was exactly 1 year to the day after the Melbourne case. That was, in Florida. There was a case in Broadhaven, Wales. Again, a UFO landed next to the school, as in all these cases. ETs came out. There was another very famous case at Hillsdale College. So these cover all kinds of schools, colleges, high schools, junior high, and elementary school, primary schools. But 50%, which is a lot, occur at elementary schools. These are long-lasting sightings. These are not brief. They are specifically coming over schools, stopping, hovering, very low level. They'll put on a display, and in 1/3 of the cases they land. I found over 100 cases. This is not a small thing. And I've gotten probably 25 more since the book came out. And I'm still getting cases. This is absolutely a thing. It's very benevolent. They are simply announcing their presence in all of these cases. It's like saying hello. And this is, I think, a very clever and effective way, because children are so unjudgmental. Their ability to learn is fantastic. They're sponges. They have no interpretations, or they don't judge in any way what they're seeing. They just lay it out. They don't say, oh, this is angels, this is demons, this is this or that. They just report what they saw. Many of them have never even heard of UFOs. And many of them who have this encounter, well, pretty much all of them say that this is something they think about daily. None of them have ever been caught in a hoax. None of them have ever retracted. Many of them have become researchers or scientists or teachers, really impacted by their experience to a degree that it changed the direction of their life. So I think these are important encounters, and it's a very effective way for the ETs to sort of get, let us know that they are here.
For good and doing good. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, Susie, you have a question?
Well, I tell you, Preston, this was such an awesome presentation, and I think any of us that need healing, we're just like sitting on the edge of our seats until your last couple of sentences when you said you didn't have the gift of, getting these ETs to heal us yet. So I think we're all going to pray for you that you get that gift, because I tell you this, I've been praying for a healing. Now I think I'll pray for an ET so that the ETs will, a contact so that I can get the healing. But this was just awesome. So many great examples of healing. So thank you. And we're going to pray for you to get that gift so you can end your presentation next time as anybody want healed? Thank you.
Thank you,
Contactees
Susie.
do have the ability. We all have the ability to heal ourselves. And
Well, we're sure trying.
meditation is the way. Astral travel is a really effective avenue that puts it in your own hands. And again, we all have challenges that we are purposely set up for ourselves to learn from. But yeah, I think it's important to people recognize that there are different avenues of healing. There are all kinds of things you can do. Exercise and diet, and surrounding yourself in a very nature-like environment. Laughter is very healing. Music. There's all kinds of avenues for healing. So I don't think we should depend on necessarily an outside source, because truly healing comes from within.
Well, everything that you mentioned so far, I'm doing. I'm up in Mount Shasta to heal my back, and I've been eating well forever and ever. And I'm really taking this healing on. I just so appreciate that you gave us this avenue. Just beautiful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, truly. It's an honor. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susie. And I want to thank everyone. I don't see any other hands up, so I'm going to go ahead and Preston, thank you one more time for being here. It was absolutely awesome. I could have sat here and listened to you all night. Hope to have you back again and possibly interview you for something else sometime. And Barbara, thank you so much for being here this month. I'm going to miss you next week.
Yes, I will miss it too. Thank you for the
Yes.
honor.
But we're going to have an absolutely phenomenal month. We have Jody Sirota, who will be with us all during the month of December. And so everyone stay tuned, come back, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone then. So thank you so much again, everyone. Much love to you, and Namaste. Bye-bye.
You
Big
love
hug,
you.
Good
everybody.
night, everyone.
Love you, love you. Thank you, Barb.